For most people, kindness is a fleeting gesture, something offered in passing before moving on with life. But for Lily Andrews, kindness was a daily ritual. Working late nights at the hospital, she often packed up uneaten meals and gave them to those living on the streets of her city. One man, in particular, became part of her routine, a quiet, older, homeless man who never asked for anything but always said thank you. What Lily didn't know was that her small gesture would ripple far beyond that city block and come roaring back into her life on her wedding day, in the form of 12 uniformed Marines and a truth that would bring every guest to their feet. It was one of those bone-cold November evenings when the sky looked bruised and the streetlights flickered like they were struggling to stay awake. Lily Andrews had just finished her double shift at the city hospital, her back aching and her scrubs faintly smelling of antiseptic and microwaved soup. Her feet dragged as she stepped out of the side entrance, carrying a paper bag filled with leftovers from the breakroom fridge, an overstuffed turkey sandwich, a cup of fruit, and a slice of pie that no one had touched since noon. She hadn't planned to take it, but something about the way the rain had started to fall outside the emergency room window made her think of the man on the bench. She had seen him there for the first time 2 weeks earlier, slumped on the old wooden bench just outside the hospital's overflow parking lot, beneath a gnarled tree that had long since lost its leaves. At first, she'd thought he might have been waiting for someone. He sat so still, so straight, with his back pressed to the slats and his eyes fixed somewhere between the sidewalk and the stars. But when she passed him the second night, then the third, and he never moved more than a few inches, never spoke to anyone, she realized he was there because he had nowhere else to go. That first night she offered him food. She had hesitated. There was a protocol after all. People were warned not to engage too closely, but Lily wasn't wired that way. She believed in seeing people, not just passing them. So she had walked toward him with slow steps, holding out a paper bag like a peace offering. "Hi," she said gently. "I've got a sandwich and some hot tea, if you'd like." He looked up at her then, and she saw something in his eyes that stopped her. Recognition, perhaps, or maybe surprise that someone was speaking to him like a human being. He didn't say anything, but he accepted the food. Just a simple nod, a thank you so soft it could have been the wind. From that night on, it became routine. Every few days after her shift, Lily brought him something, a boxed meal, soup in a thermos, clean socks once when the temperature dropped below freezing. Sometimes they spoke. Usually they didn't, but there was something quiet and respectful in the way he received her offerings. Like he understood they weren't pity, they were presents. She started to notice the little things. He never begged. He never asked for anything more than what she gave. He never looked away when she talked, even if he didn't answer. And his posture, always that rigid, upright bearing, like someone who'd once been trained never to slouch, never to look down, never to show weakness. That, and the way he flinched when a car door slammed too loud or a siren blared nearby, it all made her wonder. One night in the middle of December, she brought him a thick wool blanket from a charity drive the hospital had hosted. He accepted it with both hands, pressing it to his chest like it was something fragile. "Cold tonight," she said. He nodded. "I don't think I've ever asked. What's your name?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he answered without looking at her. "Daniel." She smiled. "Hi, Daniel. I'm Lily." "I know," he said. That made her blink. "You do?" "You wear a name tag," he said simply, and she laughed, a light, surprised sound that caught both of them off guard. From then on, their encounters carried a little more weight, a little more familiarity. He never spoke much, but when he did, it was thoughtful, deliberate. Once, she told him about a patient she'd lost and how hard it had hit her. "You care too much," he said. "Is that a bad thing?" she asked. He was quiet for a long time before replying. "No, it's rare." Sometimes she would find him gone, the bench empty, the blanket neatly folded beneath it. But he always returned, always in the same spot, always with that same quiet dignity. She began to look forward to seeing him. She even found herself wondering where he went during the day, whether he was safe, whether he had anyone left in the world. Her co-workers started noticing. "You feeding that guy again?" one nurse asked, not unkindly. Lily nodded. "He's got no one else." The nurse sighed. "You've got a good heart. Just be careful. People are unpredictable." But Daniel never was. Even when she brought him something as simple as a coffee, he'd thank her with that same gentle, steady tone. And once, near Christmas, when she handed him a plate of cookies from a holiday potluck, he looked at her longer than usual and said, "You help more than you know." She didn't realize how deeply that line had rooted itself in her until weeks later, when she found herself repeating it to a young man in the ER detoxing from heroin, or a frazzled mother who blamed herself for her child's accident. You help more than you know. She never asked him for his story. She didn't need to. There were pieces of it written all over his body language, his eyes, his silence. And the more she saw of him, the more certain she became. Daniel was a veteran, maybe Army, maybe Marine Corps. She didn't know enough to tell, but there was a stillness about him, a kind of controlled grief that said more than words ever could. She once tried to offer him a ride to a shelter. He declined, politely but firmly. "I stay where I can see the sky," he said. After that, she didn't ask again. Instead, she just kept showing up. Rain, snow, heat, didn't matter. If she had something to share, she brought it. And if he was there, he accepted it. Sometimes they sat in silence together for a few minutes before she left, and each time she walked away, she looked back just once, just to make sure he was still real. Because somehow, over those months, Daniel had become part of her life. Not in a dramatic way, not like a novel, but like a thread in a tapestry. Quiet, essential, easily overlooked by the world, but deeply woven into the fabric of her every day. She didn't know what would come of it. She certainly didn't expect that simple connection to follow her into the most important day of her life. But it would, and it would arrive with boots on stone, medals gleaming in the sun, and a story waiting to be told. By the time January rolled in with its biting winds and silvery frost, Lily's routine with Daniel had settled into something wordless yet familiar. She worked the evening shift 3 nights a week and brought him food every single one of them, without fail. What had begun as a simple gesture, a sandwich handed to a man on a bench, had quietly become something else entirely. Not quite a friendship, not quite charity. It lived in the quiet space in between. Daniel remained a man of few words. He never told her much about himself, but he always listened when she spoke. And Lily, in turn, found herself telling him more than she expected. After a hard shift, she'd drop into the spot beside him, hand him a warm container of chili or shepherd's pie, and let the day tumble out of her mouth. Stories about difficult patients, about the lonely elderly woman who called her Angel, about the baby, born 2 months premature, who clung to life like it was something personal. He never interrupted, never offered advice, just listened. She began to look forward to those few minutes of quiet after her shift, before she drove home to her small apartment. It was odd, in a way, how much comfort she found in his silence. Other times, they wouldn't speak at all. She'd walk up, hand him a hot drink and something to eat, and sit with him in companionable silence. Sometimes she wondered if he felt what she did, that strange calm that only seems to come when 2 people who don't owe each other anything sit in stillness, without needing to fill it. One particularly icy night, the city blanketed in snow and silence, Lily brought him a thermos of hot cocoa and some leftover beef stew from the hospital cafeteria. She'd tucked a little chocolate bar into the bag, too, just because. Daniel took the bag from her hands, gloved now in the thick mittens she had given him a few weeks before. He looked at her then, his eyes shadowed and searching. "You always bring extra," he said quietly. Lily tilted her head. "Extra? More than one person could eat." She shrugged. "Old habits. My mum used to say food tastes better when there's enough to share." Daniel gave her the ghost of a smile. "Your mother sounds wise." "She was," Lily said. "Lost her last year. Cancer." "I'm sorry," he said, his voice like gravel, soft but weighted. "Thanks," she replied. "I think maybe part of me is still feeding people for her. She never let anyone go hungry, not if she could help it." Daniel nodded but said nothing more. He just opened the thermos, breathed in the steam, and took a small, deliberate sip. "Still too hot," he murmured after a pause. Lily laughed. "Give it a minute. It'll be perfect." From then on, their conversations, short as they were, took on a rhythm. She'd joke that she was his personal chef, and he'd arch an eyebrow and say, "You're overqualified." Once, when she brought him a small birthday cupcake, not even sure if it was his birthday, he actually chuckled, an honest-to-God laugh that she would replay in her mind later like music. But he still never shared much, never spoke about where he slept, never mentioned family. Lily never saw him with anyone else. He was like a ghost of someone who once lived a big life, now existing only in the edges of the world. She began to notice more about him, the way he always positioned himself so he could see all exits, the way his hands were always clenched, just a bit too tight. She knew trauma when she saw it. She worked with veterans sometimes at the hospital, men and women who woke screaming, who jumped at slamming doors, who refused to close their eyes unless they were facing the door. Daniel had that same look, and still, he carried himself with a kind of discipline she respected. One day, she brought it up, carefully, gently. "Were you in the service?" she asked, handing him a hot wrap and a bottle of water. He didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the food in his lap. Finally, he said, "A long time ago." That was all. She didn't press. She didn't have to. The question had been more acknowledgement than interrogation, and his answer, though brief, was confirmation enough. From then on, she thought of him differently, not as a stranger, not just a homeless man on a bench, but as someone who had lived through something vast and unspeakable, and had somehow ended up here, in the margins, unseen by the world. And yet, she saw him. One night, after a shift that left her particularly rattled, 2 code blues, and a grieving family that wouldn't stop crying, she sat beside him on the bench longer than usual. She didn't talk. She didn't even eat. She just stared ahead, eyes glazed with exhaustion. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. "You okay?" he asked. That was the first time he'd ever asked her a question. She nodded automatically, then a moment later shook her head. "No, not really." He waited. "I lost someone tonight," she said. "A man in his 50s. Massive heart attack. His wife was there. They'd been married 32 years. Daniel nodded slowly. "That's a long time." "Yeah," she said. It doesn't get easier. You think it will, but it doesn't." Silence. Then, "If it got easy, you wouldn't be you." She blinked, turned to him. He was looking straight ahead, not at her, but his jaw was tight and his voice low and steady. "There's nothing wrong with feeling too much. That's where the good comes from." Lily stared at him, stunned, and then, without meaning to, she reached over and rested her hand on his gloved one, just briefly, just to let him know she heard him. He didn't pull away. After that night, she started keeping a little journal just for their conversations. Not the words themselves, but the feeling of them, the quiet impact, the way he always listened, the weight behind the few things he said. She didn't know why she did it. Maybe because part of her understood even then that this wasn't just a fleeting chapter, that somehow this man was going to be part of something bigger in her life. One rainy February evening, she brought him a fresh pair of waterproof boots, having guessed his size as best she could. He looked at them for a long time before speaking. "No one's bought me shoes in 20 years, he said. "Well," Lily said, smiling, "I have terrible taste in shoes, but I'm good with socks." She didn't expect what happened next. He reached into the inside of his tattered coat and pulled out a worn patch. It was frayed at the edges, olive green with black thread, a Marine Corps insignia. He didn't say anything, just handed it to her. She looked down at it and then back up at him. "You don't have to." "I want you to have it," he said. She took it, holding it like it was made of glass. That night, she went home and cried for reasons she didn't fully understand. The patch stayed on her kitchen windowsill from that day on. Every time she saw it, she thought of how little it took to make someone feel remembered, and how much it meant when they chose to remember you back. Spring came softly, as if the world was waking from a long, cold sleep. Cherry blossoms unfurled their pale pink petals, and the city streets began to buzz with life again. For Lily Andrews, the season brought more than just warmer days. It brought love. After months of quiet hope and stolen smiles, Ben, her boyfriend of 2 years and a firefighter with a heart as big as his laugh, had finally asked her to marry him. The moment was simple but perfect. Under a canopy of stars, with the distant wail of sirens mingling with the gentle night breeze, he knelt and held out a ring that sparkled like a promise. Lily said yes without hesitation. Planning the wedding became a whirlwind of joy and nervous excitement. They decided on a small ceremony in a garden nestled behind the old library downtown, a place where they had first met during a volunteer cleanup. The garden was charming, filled with blooming roses and winding paths, a sanctuary in the heart of the city. It was perfect for what they wanted, intimate, meaningful, and free from the rush and noise of a big, flashy event. Through all the arrangements, choosing the dress, sending invitations, tasting cakes, Lily never forgot about Daniel. The homeless veteran she had come to know, The quiet man who sat patiently on his bench every evening. The man who had shared so much silence and so few words. He had become a fixture in her life, a steady presence even when things felt chaotic. One afternoon, while folding napkins with her bridesmaids, Lily found herself staring at the invitation stack. An idea bloomed in her mind, a way to invite Daniel without making it awkward. She took one of the invitations and carefully wrote his name on the front. Master Sergeant Daniel Cole. It felt right, somehow formal, somehow respectful. The day she handed him the envelope was cool and clear. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement where he sat. Lily approached with the usual warm smile, a bag of leftovers in one hand and the invitation in the other. "Daniel," she called softly. He looked up, and for a moment his eyes held a question, then a flicker of recognition. "I wanted to give you this," she said, extending the envelope. He took it slowly, his fingers brushing over the script. He didn't open it. "You're invited," she added. It's important to me, and I'd be honored if you came." His gaze lifted to hers, and in it she saw something she hadn't seen before, a flicker of something she thought might be hope. "I don't know how to be at a place like that," he said quietly. "You don't have to be anyone but yourself," she said gently. "That's all I want." He nodded once. "I'll think about it." Days passed, and she didn't see him. The bench was empty. Worried, she asked around the hospital's volunteer network if anyone had seen him. No one had. She began to fear he might have disappeared, swallowed up by the city like so many others. Then, just 3 days before the wedding, she spotted him again, sitting quietly where he always did. His coat was patched and worn, but he was there. She walked over and handed him a fresh sandwich, a thermos of coffee, and the invitation once more. Daniel took the invitation and looked at her with eyes that held a silent apology. "I'll come," he said. That simple promise filled Lily's heart with something she hadn't expected: relief, joy, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The days that followed were a blur of final preparations. She shared the news with Ben, who immediately insisted that Daniel would be a guest of honor. Ben was fascinated by the stories she'd told him, the man who never asked for anything but had given her so much in return. He even went out of his way to contact a veterans outreach program, trying to find out more about Daniel and see if they could help him settle somewhere safer. But Daniel remained elusive, a quiet figure who preferred the bench over shelters, the night air over crowded rooms. On the morning of the wedding, Lily woke early, nerves fluttering in her chest like butterflies. The garden was alive with colour. The tulips and daffodils swayed in the gentle breeze, and the cherry blossoms drifted down like confetti. Her bridesmaids buzzed around her, pinning flowers and smoothing her dress, but her mind kept drifting to Daniel. Would he come? Would he be comfortable? Would he feel out of place among friends and family in their finery? She told herself to focus on the day ahead, but the thought of Daniel filled a corner of her heart, stubborn and persistent. As the afternoon wore on, guests began to arrive, filling the garden with laughter and warmth. Ben looked handsome in his suit, his smile bright and steady. The ceremony was about to begin. Just as Lily adjusted her veil, the soft sound of boots on gravel caught her attention. She turned toward the garden path and stopped in her tracks. 12 Marines marched in perfect formation, their dress blues shining under the sun, medals gleaming on their chests. Leading them was Daniel, clean-shaven, standing tall, a look of quiet pride etched on his face. The entire garden fell silent. Lily's heart pounded in her ears. The man who had once been just a nameless figure on a bench was now standing before her in full uniform, surrounded by brothers in arms. Daniel approached, halted before her, and gave the sharpest salute she'd ever seen. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady and clear. "Permission to present our thanks." Tears welled in Lily's eyes as the Marines stepped forward one by one, sharing stories of how Daniel had helped each of them through their darkest times, how the kindness she had shown to him had rippled outward, saving lives beyond what she could have ever imagined. The garden bloomed with emotion, and Lily knew this day, her wedding day, had become something far greater than she'd ever dreamed. The moment the Marines appeared at the garden, a hush fell over the crowd. The usual murmur of wedding guests, the gentle clinking of glasses and whispered congratulations, all faded away as 12 pairs of polished boots stepped in unison on the gravel path. Their dress blues gleamed with the kind of sharpness and pride that only years of disciplined service can produce. The sunlight caught the medals pinned over their hearts, and for a brief, electrifying moment, the garden felt like it had been transported to a place of honor and remembrance far beyond its urban surroundings. At the front of the formation stood Daniel, no longer the shadowy figure hunched on the bench, but a man restored. His uniform was immaculate, the insignia on his collar crisp and bright, and his posture was rigid yet proud, a physical declaration that he had reclaimed something lost. When his eyes met Lily's, there was an unspoken understanding, a bridge built across months of quiet care and unacknowledged pain. Ben, standing beside Lily, caught the significance immediately. His firefighter's eyes softened with respect and awe. The man Lily had cared for was not just any homeless stranger, but a veteran, a Marine, someone who had carried burdens few could imagine. Daniel stepped forward and gave a crisp salute. His voice, when he spoke, was steady and filled with a gravity that demanded attention. "Ma'am, on behalf of my brothers and myself, I want to thank you for the kindness you showed when no one else would. You saved more than just me." The crowd listened, spellbound. One by one, the Marines began to share stories, tales of struggle and survival that intertwined with the quiet act of receiving a meal, a blanket, or simply the dignity of being seen. Each story painted a vivid picture of the ripple effect of compassion. There was Corporal Reyes, who had been drowning in despair after his discharge until he found a group of veterans inspired by Daniel's quiet leadership to lift each other up. Sergeant Lewis spoke of nights spent on cold streets, broken and alone, until someone passed along a meal and a simple message: "You matter." Private Thompson, youngest of the group, shared how seeing Daniel accepted and cared for renewed his hope for his own future. Lily's eyes filled with tears as she listened. She realized then that her small acts of kindness toward one man had blossomed into a lifeline for many. The dinner she brought, the blankets she handed out, they had become symbols of something far greater: hope, healing, and human connection. Daniel turned back to her, his gaze softening. "You never asked for thanks. You never demanded recognition. But you gave us what we needed most: to be seen and to be cared for." The guests applauded, some wiping tears away, others standing taller in quiet salute. Ben stepped forward and took Lily's hand, squeezing it gently. "This is the kind of love story we all need to hear," he said quietly. The ceremony resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. It was no longer just a wedding between two people in love. It was a celebration of community, resilience, and the unexpected ways kindness can transform lives. As Lily and Ben exchanged vows, Daniel and his fellow Marines stood proudly by, their presence a living testament to the power of compassion. When the ceremony ended and the reception began, guests mingled with the veterans, sharing laughter and stories. The garden filled with warmth, not just from the spring sun, but from the undeniable glow of human connection. Lily found herself beside Daniel once more. She reached out and gently clasped his hand. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded. "No, Lily, thank you for reminding me I'm not alone." That day, beneath the blooming cherry blossoms, a new chapter began, not just for Lily and Ben, but for a community knit together by respect, gratitude, and the simple, enduring power of kindness. After the wedding, life took on a new texture for everyone involved, especially for Lily and Daniel. The miraculous day when 12 Marines marched into the garden had been a turning point, not just a beautiful moment frozen in time, but the beginning of something deeper and lasting. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's world began to change in ways he never expected. The invitation to the wedding had been more than a simple gesture. It was a doorway. Through it, he stepped back into a community that had once embraced him, even if he had long since fallen through its cracks. The Marines who had stood beside him that day didn't just disappear afterward. They reached out, helping him navigate the often bewildering systems veterans face when they try to reclaim stability. Medical appointments, housing applications, counseling sessions, all became part of the process that Daniel, once resigned to surviving on the streets, now approached with cautious hope. Lily remained a steady presence in his life, her kindness no longer quiet and tentative, but firm and unwavering. She accompanied him to appointments, advocated for him when paperwork got lost or red tape tangled, and shared in small victories: a new ID card, a warm bed secured at a local veterans shelter, a health checkup that found manageable issues instead of unchecked illnesses. Through it all, Daniel's guarded demeanor softened, revealing glimpses of the man she had first recognized months ago, the disciplined Marine, the proud veteran, the human being who had endured so much. For Lily, this chapter was equally transformative. Her relationship with Ben grew stronger, deepened not just by love, but by shared purpose. Ben admired the way she never wavered in her compassion, the way she had quietly woven Daniel back into the fabric of their lives. Together, they became advocates, volunteers, and friends to the veteran community, using their voices to raise awareness and build support networks. The wedding that had brought them together became a symbol of what could happen when empathy met action. There were challenges, of course. Healing is rarely a straight path. Daniel had nights when old memories clawed their way back, moments when the weight of his past threatened to drag him under. But the support around him, the steady hands of friends, the firm grasp of newfound purpose, helped him keep moving forward. One afternoon, months after the wedding, Daniel invited Lily and Ben to a small gathering at the Veterans Center where he had recently begun volunteering. It was a modest room, decorated with banners and photographs that told stories of service, sacrifice, and resilience. Veterans shared coffee and conversation, laughter punctuating the room like warm sunlight. Daniel stood before the group, his posture confident, his voice clear. "I want to thank everyone here," he said, "but especially Lily. She saw me when I thought no one would. She reminded me that kindness can be a lifeline, and that sometimes it's the smallest things, leftover meals, a listening ear, that make the biggest difference."
The room erupted in applause, and Lily felt tears prick at her eyes once more. This time, they were tears of pride and profound gratitude.
Her heart swelled as she looked at Daniel, not as a man defined by hardship, but as one defined by resilience and renewed dignity. In the months and years that followed, their friendship continued to grow. Daniel moved into a small apartment near the city center, a space filled with quiet light and the soft hum of everyday life. Lily visited often, bringing homemade meals and stories from her hospital rounds. Ben, too, became a fixture, sharing tales from the fire station and lending a steady hand whenever needed. Together, they forged a new kind of family, one built not on blood, but on compassion, respect, and shared hope. And though Daniel's journey was far from over, he no longer walked it alone. The wedding day remained etched in their memories, not just for its beauty, but for the way it transformed lives, sparked new beginnings, and proved that sometimes the greatest acts of love come in the form of leftovers shared on a cold bench, and 12 Marines marching in to say, "You belong."